If you're just coming in, we've got some handouts right there. Welcome. Welcome to those of you who are here in person at All Saints Church in the Forum. Welcome to everyone participating online from wherever you are. My name is Mike Kinman. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the rector, the senior pastor here at All Saints Church. Now, for years and years, we haven't had a forum on Palm Sunday. And then someone told me that George Regas used to do a forum on Palm Sunday every year on end-of-life issues, because they're things that all of us deal with from the moment we're born. We start getting old, and we tend to not talk about. And so it's an opportunity, particularly as we enter Holy Week and the contemplation of those mighty acts, to look at ourselves. And it actually isn't just about looking at our death, it's about looking at our life and what parts of it we want to carry on. And also maybe what do we want to do with however many years we have left. And that can be anywhere from 110 to none of us know the day or the hour. So really, really blessed this morning to have a really great panel. I think all of you know Sally Howard, who is our Senior Associate Rector here. We have Liz Pereno, who is an Episcopal priest and the chaplain at Montecedro. We have Susan Brown, who is a parishioner here at All Saints and works with with a group called By Your Side, which she's going to tell you more about. And then Brittany, I am forgetting your last name, I'm so sorry. Brittany Duke, who is a partner with Gloria Pitzer at a law firm here in Pasadena, and I'll let her talk more about that, who is going to talk about estate planning. And so we're just going to go down the row here, and everyone's going to share some things, and then we're going to open it up for some conversations, and we'll have some resources. And hopefully we can all learn a lot in the next 45 minutes. We'll try to get all the resources that we have here posted online so that folks who are streaming and participating with us that way can take part. And so, Sally, I want to start with you. Do you want to kind of give a brief overview of what are some of the psychological and spiritual issues involved with aging and end of life?
Yes, I'd be happy to, and I will do my best to be brief. We all have challenges to our identities and opportunities for growth, from really the moment that we're born. And those always involve changes in our bodies, life demands within the culture or the context that we're in. And aging and end of life are part of that continuum and has both challenges and new opportunities. And one of the things we really need to do, broadly in the culture is reframe aging from decline, and uselessness to an unprecedented stage of life that truly is full of possibilities. And, because of the ageism, I think in our society, we don't have a lot of maps for that, but we can create them. What are some of the challenges to, identity? And these are going to be familiar, to most of you, I think. Retirement, or changing roles that may feel exciting, but also unfamiliar in a way. And that, of course, occurs in our culture that really defines people's worth by productivity, right? So that makes it more challenging. This stage of life also includes grieving. We all know that as we get older, there are more losses for us, deaths around us. Most people at some point experience or face decreasing independence. Again, that takes place in a cultural context of hyper-individualism and pulling oneself up by our own bootstraps, right? And that complicates those challenges to decreasing independence if that's what a person experiences. And we know, that health is an ability, or one way of thinking about it is an ability to go back and forth between one's own resources and dependence throughout life. That's a healthy need throughout life. But anyway, it is a challenge. And also we have a growing awareness of physical vulnerability and mortality. And that often brings fear for people. And many, many people feel disoriented and marginalized and invisible or unimportant in this stage. And again, that's why awareness and thinking about it and developing, a much more accurate reframing of aging and end of life is so important. It is a liminal time, for people, especially if there are changing roles, changing identity. And, it's a little bit like a chrysalis, right, in a butterfly, that, it's a time when, we may be in a space where we're in transition from one aspect of life into a different, stage of life. But it also offers a new beginning and a sense of passion and purpose. And how we think about aging really does impact us. And I'm sure other folks will have input about that also. But discrimination and ageism is pervasive in our culture and infiltrates really almost every day, of our lives. And then, as things on the outside do, sometimes they become internal monologues, right? And, someone I read once proposed doing an age belief journaling, which is to start to notice the messages that are present in media and language and stereotypes, and journaling those so you can be aware of the kinds of negative images or ageist images that are out there, and then challenging those, right, and finding different messages and different ways of thinking about us. Let's see. The last thing, or the last topic I think I would mention is that one of the most powerful reframes, which for me is just, deep in truth, is that aging is a spiritual journey. Now, of course, all of our life is a spiritual journey, but aging is a spiritual journey. And often, some of the gifts are that we have more time during the day to reflect. We can begin to develop a meaningful narrative that kind of ties our life together, and releasing kind of past identities that we've carried all along, some of which we'll take with us, but opening up for new ones. And, one of the things about the narrative, a new narrative for this time is really thinking about deeper connections, not only between other people, but deeper connection to the divine, to God within us and God all around us. And, reflecting on what stories do we have, about God? Do we have stories about God that are frightening? Are there any remnants of stories about death and, death as punishment, rather than part of the created order, you know. And I think stories about, God that are, much more helpful, which is that we are surrounded, we live, breathe, and have our being in God's love that is inexhaustible, unchangeable, and that holds us, the same love holds us throughout life and death. And so it's a time also to reflect on what kind of stories, are you carrying into this time about God and yourself and other people.
Great, and that's a good sort of transition to you, Liz. Your vocation is chaplaincy at a residential. What is the official word for Moned? Is it a retirement facility?
It's a residential retirement community.
So why don't you talk a little about Moned and also your work, but also some of the issues that you deal with in chaplaincy?
Sure. So before I start that, though, I'm going to try. I don't have any notes, so I'm going to try not to ramble. But please interrupt me if I am rambling. So Moned is in Pasadena. It is a residential retirement community. We have a space right now for 220 residents in independent and assisted living. And then we have a memory care unit that is, we have room for 20 residents. We do not have a skilled nursing facility. So our assisted living we have 5 different levels. It starts with just med management, and it can go up as people have needs, whether it's to come in and help them get out of bed in the morning, help them get dressed. It could go to doing their laundry, their meal prep, all that kind of stuff. We have all kinds of things for residents to do. I always tell people, if you are bored at Moned, it's because you want to be. There's always lectures and field trips, and you have Janet Stevenson here, a former resident, and she can tell you all about it. And we love having Janet come and visit us, and she jumped ship, but yes, and she still has very many friends there. And we are in the process of building more units, and we will have room for another 40 units, and I don't even know, I guess that would be 80 residents. So the age is, our youngest current resident is 67 years old, and our oldest is 101 years old.
So there's someone older than Jean Bruce Poole there.
There is.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, she's close, but yes, there is somebody older than Jean. The chaplaincy is the needs of a chaplain are very different. One of the ways that Moned is unique is that they do have a full-time chaplain there. They realize the importance of chaplaincy. It wasn't always that case, and the residents thought that they didn't need a chaplain until they got one. That was the previous chaplain. I'm the second chaplain there. And once he left, they were, well, get us a chaplain, we need a chaplain. So they now know they need a chaplain. So, of course, the average age of our residents is 83. And with our population, we do have a lot of death. And most of our residents realize that this is their last stop before they're going to pass away. So there's a lot of being at bedsides, being with families at that point. A lot of times when people are about to die, it's informing, making sure that the family knows what to look for, what's happening with their loved one's body as they're declining, and what that all entails. It's being with the family. Most of the time at that point, the resident might be non-responsive. They might be talking a little bit, but not much, and so you're there, you're saying prayers over the person who's declining, but you're really there for the family. You're holding their hand and walking through this journey with them. And it can be, of course, very difficult. They all know it's coming, but people do not want to see their parents die. And it can be very difficult for them. Sally was talking about losing mobility and so forth. There's a lot of grief that goes on at Moned, whether it's losing someone that you've loved, spouse or so forth. We have a lot of people who have lost children. either as children or as adults. When you get to be 90 years old, your children are probably in their 70s or 60s, late 60s. So we do have a lot of people who have lost children also. But when people move to Monte Cedro, most of the time they really want to go. They come, they tour the place, they see how wonderful it is, all the activities and so forth, and they want to come. But there are people who, they're there because their children want them there. They don't want to be there. There's a lot of grief that can happen when you move from your home that you've been in for 40, 50 years into a new facility. There can be a lot of grief of that. The home that you're leaving, the friends, the neighbors, and so forth. If you're moving across country, there's a lot of grief that can happen there. And also, there's a lot of grief. I deal a lot with grief. There's a lot of grief when you have to give up your driver's license, when you can no longer drive a car, when you can no longer use your hands as much as you could, or now you need to have a wheelchair. There can be a lot of grief in all of that. So that's a big part of what the chaplain does too, is dealing with those issues. I try to, gratitude helps a lot if you can be grateful for what you still have and not dwell on what you've lost. You know, okay, I can still hold my grandson even though I can't walk any longer. Those types of things, whatever it is that you still have, if you can have gratitude for those things instead of dwelling on what you've lost. When you come to Monte Cedro, and I tell people if they don't want to be there, you can look on it as this is a gift you are giving your children. Because now they no longer have to worry about you being home and falling and sitting there for days and nobody knows that you've fallen. You come to Monte Cedro, they know, your children know that you're going to be looked after. And that could be a big relief for their children. It's so, you know, if you think of it as a gift for them, that would really help. We do, yeah. As a full-time chaplain and a priest, I do Eucharist once a week at Monte Cedro. We have Bible study. I do the blessings of the animals. We have, I don't know, 30 dogs, I think, that live at Monte Cedro. We have cats. We used to have a bird. She's moved out. So we do all kinds of different things like that, memorial services, celebrations of life, whatever's needed. We are a member of the Episcopal Community Services, and Susan's going to talk more about that. But there's no requirement to be a certain faith to move into Monte Cedro. We have several Jewish residents, and so I work closely with the Jewish chaplain and from the Jewish Temple and Center, Pasadena. She comes and she does services. We have dinners and so forth for our Jewish residents. We always put out menorahs and stuff at Hanukkah. And so we work closely with that population. I work closely with that chaplain. And then with various churches around the city too of Altadena.
That's wonderful, and so we can.
I was rambling.
No, you weren't. You were. That was great. And actually, we're really blessed in this area to have many different retirement communities, and frankly, many different price ranges. I want to lift up one of our parishioners, Frank Cunningham. Frank really works as someone that helps you find your match with the right place. He did that, helped with my dad, and we were able to look at a whole bunch of different places. And it's a really, really great service to have. And Frank does it. You don't pay for Frank. Whoever you end up moving in with, they sort of pay the fee to Frank. And so, if you want to get in touch with Frank, let me know, and I can put you in touch with him. Want to move over to Susan, and so much of what we're talking about really is how do we do this together? And so I want you to sort of talk about By Your Side and the work that you do.
I'm going to do this backwards from my notes because Liz gave me the handoff. Just so you're aware, there are multiple Episcopal communities and services, hence communities. We're 100 years old. We started out as the Episcopal home in Alhambra. We now include Monte Cedro, the Canterbury and Rancho Palos Verdes. Aliso Viejo has the Covington. We also have a community in Montrose called 12 Oaks, which is small and growing, which is targeted at a population that was not able, for whatever reason, usually the kind of work they were doing, to accumulate a large cash deposit and it is a wonderful community where we have part-time chaplaincy and by-your-side companioning. And the reason for that is that people need meaning. They need all that Liz talked about, the companioning that she provides and our chaplains provide and all of you provide in those times of change, transition, and grief, but they also need meaning. And where By Your Side was born, however, was not to serve the population in our own communities, believe it or not, but about 12 years ago, a priest ordained from this church, the Reverend Sarah Nichols, Pamela Close, who was at the time the director of palliative care at County Hospital, now General Hospital. I do that every time because I have to train myself not to say county anymore. They've changed their name. And Don Gabbard, who was an occasional parishioner here at All Saints, got together because there was a huge need for people to support patients at the county hospitals. So the first cohorts that we trained, and Rosemary Hyde is sitting over there, was in, I think, the first cohort, I think she was designed to send people to county to be with people, not only older people, because guess what? People die at any age. Okay, we tend to forget that. A lot of us, some of us don't. But, and a lot of people at county were dying or in the hospital for many months with no visitors, no one there for them. Because why? They were from out of the country. They were people from off the streets. Nobody knew they were there. Nobody knew who they were. And so that was the first iteration of By Your Side. It was really quickly evident that there was an interest outside of volunteering at county. That what people came to us looking for was an understanding of something that they felt in their core, which is what Francis Weller in his really good book called The Wild Edge of Grief. I should know, we've had a book group going on for the last 6 weeks, a really good one, by the way. What he calls the unforgotten wisdom. Okay, so what's that? That's what we know about how to love each other. We just don't do it as much as we used to. It's an ancient way of being with each other, truly ancient. And it really just takes a little spark and a little bit of support and a whole lot of information, which some of the people who are in the room have just had tossed at them for the last month, because I intend people to go into volunteering, if they so choose, armed with everything they need, which is, you know, everything from quality of life discussions to what does dying look like, what do you need to know about HIPAA that you didn't think you ever wanted to know. That's got to do that. Things like elder abuse that we don't talk about. Everybody thinks it's rare. It's not. So that's what we do. And for many years, we didn't train our residents. You know why? Janet's heard this. She's going to laugh. Because, quote, we don't want to depress our residents. Like they don't know that people die. For all the reasons Liz just mentioned. They know very well. And we've trained a number of residents. The most robust group, volunteer group right now is Montecedro. And why? To be with each other. To be with their peers. To be with the person next door in the hall. To be with the person who is in the memory care courtyards area. Not just for that very last moment. That's important. But for the months and sometimes years that we need companioning. I have, of course, anybody who knows me would know this, I brought flyers and I brought brochures. So see me later.
Great.
One of the things we talk a lot about, though, is the need to speak with your family, to have the difficult conversations. We all think about estate planning, talk about it, right? You have to make sure that your stuff and your resources are allocated. Well, guess what? If you don't talk to your family about what you see for the end of your life what you need. And you don't do more than name somebody and never tell them that they're on your advance directive, because that happens, right? You're in the emergency room with your great Aunt Sally, and your name is on the paper, and you never had that conversation with her. If we don't have those conversations, then it isn't okay. It isn't okay. So, with that, I'm going to hand this off to Brittany, or whoever.
Well, thank you. We talked a little bit about those roadblocks, and I think what we see quite often is there's this issue of fear that people may think, well, once I do my estate plan, that means my time's up. And that is not the case. There's no magic to doing an estate plan that makes it your time. And the choices, again, become one of those big roadblocks. And talking to your family and understanding, what do I need to know when I go to see an attorney to do an estate plan? That can sometimes feel overwhelming. And I think that people have this idea that unless I know exactly what I need and I've got it perfect, that it's not time for me to go and do that. That is not the case. You can always amend your documents as long as you have capacity. And so don't let that be the roadblock for you and from getting it done. And I'll say the last roadblock we often see is age. People think, well, I'm not old enough to do that yet. And then by the time they need it and they realize they need it, it may be too late. There can be issues of capacity. There can be issues of being able to sign, getting an attorney out to you in time. So please don't wait. There are a lot of estate planning attorneys in Pasadena, so no reason to wait. So I just wanted to give a brief overview. I know this is usually a much larger conversation when we talk about estate planning, but what is estate planning? It typically involves 3 distinct goals. One is to usually avoid court intervention. If you do not have an estate plan, if you do not have advance health care directives, powers of attorney, it is often that your loved ones or whoever's managing things for you will have to go to a court to get that power. So if you have those things set up in advance, they can avoid the cost and expense and time that it takes to deal with a court to go through those procedures. Some of the buzzwords you may have heard recently in the news, conservatorships, that's when you are still alive, but you cannot make decisions for yourself. Advanced healthcare directives, powers of attorney for finance, those types of documents can help you avoid a conservatorship and that court intervention. So it's not only is it a roadmap, that you have talked to your family about, but it's also an extreme cost savings. It's an extreme time savings. So those are important parts about why you want to get an estate plan going. The other court intervention that we want to try to avoid is probate. And you may have heard of probate. That is when you pass, your assets need to be distributed. And if you don't have a will or a trust, depending on your assets and what you needed, again, someone from your family will have to go to court, say, these are the heirs at law, usually your children, nieces, nephews, however far down the line it goes. And then that process gets handled through the court. And that is, again, a lengthy and time-consuming process. So getting something set up ahead of time will ultimately save your loved ones who are dealing with those types of issues a lot of time, a lot of expense, and you can be creative with your distributions. So that's another goal with estate planning is gifting. If you have specific places that you want, charities, churches, your favorite...
All Saints Church, perhaps?
Yeah.
Put a plug in.
One of them, yeah. Your favorite niece who wouldn't normally take under, under a normal succession plan. You can make those gifts. Whereas if you don't have anything written down like that in an estate plan, it would just go to your heirs at law. So maybe that brother that you don't particularly want to get your stuff, that would be the person who would be entitled. So it's important to think about that. And some people have blended families, multiple marriages, and you want to make sure that your kids are taken care of. So those are important goals. And then again, like I said, the last And I think one of the most important things about estate planning is that ease of administration. It gives the people in your life who are taking care of these things a plan. It lets them know what you wanted, so they're not making that decision at a moment when they don't know what you wanted. And at least if you have spoken with them or put it in writing, it takes that burden from them. Because it is your direction. You are telling them what you want. And so it's so important to your family and those people that love you, that want to take care of you. So I'll just quickly go through the types of documents. First are powers of attorney. These documents operate while you are alive and you are unable to make decisions. So the most common is, I'm in the hospital, I'm unconscious, I can't make decisions. Who is going to make sure my rent is paid, my mortgage is paid, the lights stay on, the gardener's still coming? Those types of everyday issues that you may need, you'll want to have someone put in your durable power of attorney. There are typically two types, one for finance, so that person will manage your finances, be able to access your accounts, pay your bills. The other is for healthcare, advanced healthcare directives, and that lists a person who is able to make decisions for your medical needs. They will also be able to look at your directive and determine, did they have any last wishes regarding burial, cremation? Do they have certain requests regarding end-of-life decisions, organ donations, relief from pain? Those are all things that you can put in your advanced healthcare directive to help people know what your wishes are ahead of time. And if you have one, typically a physician or hospital will use that document to be able to contact those people who should be making those decisions for you. And then, so those documents operate while you're alive. Once you pass, durable powers of attorney and advanced healthcare directives typically don't have any effect anymore because they are supposed to be used during your lifetime. That's when we get over into documents like a will and trust. Typically, we would set up a trust if you have real property, then you need a trust to avoid probate. And if you have assets that are currently, the limit is about $180,000. So if you have assets above that amount, or if you own real property, you should be looking into getting a trust prepared for yourself. And that would allow you to avoid that probate process. It's going to allow someone to come in without further court intervention to manage your assets, to deal with your property, sell it, get it ready, whatever the case may be. So, and those are all things that you can discuss with an estate planning attorney. They'll be able to guide you as to what is an appropriate document for you based on your assets and your goals and what you're trying to do. And then the other way we can avoid probate, and this is something that we need to do probably more often, is take a look at what you've already got. So many of you may have estate planning documents, but you haven't looked at them in 15 years. And you go back and you say, oh, well, Fred passed away and he was my number one person who was supposed to take care of things, and he's been gone for 10 years. And so people tend to forget that they need to look at these things every once in a while and make sure they're up to date. And also look at your retirement accounts, your 401k, your IRA. You may have your parent as your beneficiary because you started that account when you first started working. And since then, you've been married, you've had children, and that beneficiary designation no longer applies. So it's a good idea to get an idea of, what do I have, where is it at, and is everything up to date on it? And then if that's the case and you say, and I still think maybe I need to talk to someone about an estate plan, then go to an attorney, show them what you have, and we're happy to guide you on what you might need.
That's great. I want to put in a plug for the trust, which is my parents did this. And my mom really worked on it, put, the house, everything into a trust, named my brother and I as successor trustees. And then she died very quickly, leaving my dad, who many of you knew, who had Alzheimer's. And so it was a very easy process for him to resign his trusteeship and for my brother and I to be able to still pay their bills and sell the house and do all this. Where if they hadn't done that, it would have, while we were grieving, while we were moving dad, while we were doing all these things, we would have been having to go through these legal processes. it was one of the biggest gifts my parents gave us, was setting that up so it would be easy for us. And that's something that is, I mean, it really is, I think about this, like I think about this as a gift to whomever we're leaving behind. And this isn't just about getting old. How many of you have ridden in a car in the last week? 44,000 people died in car accidents last year. This can happen at any time. And in fact, I remember Robin and I first decided we needed to get a will when we were both going to be traveling to Ghana together. And so we met with an estate lawyer, and he basically said, you were in more danger of dying driving to my office than you are flying to Africa. His like, you should, and because we were thinking if we both died, well, we would want to make sure our children went where we wanted them to go. And he's like, you should have done this years ago. And so, doing it right now. And then also what you said about reviewing this. I find it really handy to pick one day a year. For me, I like it as Holy Saturday because it's the day that, Jesus was lying in the tomb. It's easy to sort of remember that. To go over we're in desperate need of reviewing our estate plan now that both of our kids are grown. But even things like the memorial service and what do I want from that and things like that. It's helpful to pick one day a year and then have, do the thinking about it, have the conversations, and that helps 15 years not go by. And so I want to cover two things really quickly, and we have a few minutes left for questions. The first is about estate planning. I'd like to put a plug in for remembering All Saints Church in your estate planning. It's incredibly important for this church to be sustained. We all, in so many ways, stand on the shoulders of those who came before. One of the ways that we encourage people to think about this is, what would it be like to endow your pledge? Say you pledge, $1,000 a year. Well, what would it take? And I can't do the math, but I'm sure someone can. Saying a 4% or 5% draw that would generate income of $1,000 a year. And so that's a way that legacy, can live on. Or maybe it's something like, I've loved the Children, Youth, and Families program here. And I'd like to maybe set up an endowment gift for that, or for the buildings, or things like that. Or just, I want to make a gift to the church. But it is a really important way that your legacy can live on. I also want to talk about, and I think we have these available, and many of you have them, but if you didn't, they're available right here, about planning your memorial service. And that can seem like sort of a maudlin thing to do. And what I want to say is, I find it, I wished I'd started doing this when I was 18. Because if you look at this, I'm going to read the first 3 guiding questions on this. And the idea is, you want a service that represents your life. What is the most important value or values that I have tried to live my life by? What do I want people most to remember about me? If I could say one last thing to the people I love the most, what would it be? It's really helpful to think of these things while we still have a lot of life ahead of us. Well, what's the most important value that I've tried to live my life by? Well, that makes me look at my life. Am I actually doing that? We had, some of you were at Marty Coleman's memorial service yesterday, and it was a glorious celebration of life. And part of that was, Marty was someone who so clearly lived the values that guided her life that people were like, oh my gosh, what a wonderful service. And it was the easiest thing in the world. I won't say that to Melissa Hayes, who had to actually put the liturgy together. But in terms of oh my gosh, what represents Marty? Marty was she so clearly lived her values that it was just sort of expressing that was just it was a joy. And so I think, okay, what are the values that I want remembered? Well, it's one thing to have them remembered in a service, but they'll really be remembered if people remembered them without a service to remind you. And so am I doing that? What do I want people most to remember about me? Well, if I died right now, what would people most remember about me? And if it's not what I want, well, how do I live my life so that happens? And then if I could say one last thing to the people I love the most, what would it be? Say that now. Don't waste your time. Don't let a second go by. Love you, sweetie. Say that now. And so this can be really great clarification especially if you sort of look at it every year to sort of say, how am I going? How are we doing? And then the final thing I want to say is I want to tell you about just an amazing person I knew in my last congregation in St. Louis. Her name was Gussie Fian. And Gussie finally died at age 106, and I just decided that I look at myself as on a Gussie scale, so I wasn't going to be middle-aged till I was 53, and now I'm middle-aged. Gussie's husband died when she was in her early 80s. And a lot of times people would say, okay, well, had a good run, that's fine. Gussie lived for 25 years after Mayfair died. And her social calendar was packed every day. She counted the money every Monday morning at church. She had friends. She had a vibrant life. And she just realized she was going to live every second of her life. I knew Gussie for the last 8 years of her life, and she impacted me deeply. So you are never too old to have a deep impact on the life of other people. You are never too old to find great meaning in your life. And so this isn't just about sort of, last one out, turn out the lights. It's not about that. It is about a way of intentional living. And then really giving those who are following you the gift of, while they're grieving your death, not to have to figure all this other stuff out. I really encourage you to fill this out. And then make copies where people know where to find them. Literally send one to the church. We will put it in a file and we will have it. Make sure that your children, your friends, whomever, your spouse, knows where these things are. There are few things more frustrating than when someone dies particularly unexpectedly and you have no idea where the paperwork is. That's actually in some ways worse than knowing it's not there at all. Because if you know it's not there, at least you know what you have to deal with. If you think, yeah, it's somewhere, then it's like, well, I know that there are wishes out there somewhere and I need to find them so that I can follow them. And legally, you really have to do that. So I encourage you to do these things. I encourage you to pick one day a year to focus on this, just so it gets hardwired in and you do it every year. Otherwise, it just becomes one of those things, the urgent crowds out the important, and it never gets done. And since Holy Saturday is coming up 6 days from now, I submit that as an opportunity, even just to sit down and do the thinking, to have the conversations, to do the work. So we've got a few minutes left. Well, we actually got time for probably one question, and then I think some folks can stick around for a little bit. I know Sally and I have to go get ready for, I think Janet's got something. So Janet, I'm going to come over to you with the mic.
Can I mention something just before you start, Janet? We also do pre-planning of services themselves. And if you are interested in doing that, please call the Pastoral Care Office, and our admin, Ashley Hengst, will take your name and we will set up a time. If we have enough people, we might even do a group to do it. So if you want to look at a service and see what the components are and what your choices might be, we are happy to do that. And her number is 583-2765, or you can go on the webpage and you can find her.
Still time for a bomb question. You talked about intentional living. How does All Saints feel about intentional dying, medical aid in dying? And that may be another.
So, well, I think that can be another, but what I will say is All Saints, I will speak for myself, because I don't believe All Saints has taken an opinion on, an official view on that, and it's a controversial topic, so I will just say I'm going to speak for myself, and maybe Sally, if she wants to, can speak for herself. I think it's an important option to have. And we have had at least one parishioner that I know of who has chosen that option. They went to Europe to do it. I have told people that if they need someone to do that, to help them, particularly if they have a terminal illness and they are in pain, and frankly, where I'm uncomfortable is sort of putting myself in the position of like being like judge and jury about when. I think there are certainly ethical issues about mental capacity to make that decision that need to be dealt with. But I have no ethical issues at all personally with helping someone make that choice for themselves, to support someone in that choice, being with them while they do it. I think, I think there are situations, especially because I have known people who have, basically the end-of-life industrial complex has drained every penny they have, and they have had nothing to pass on to their children except for debt. And they wished they would have had that opportunity. And the memory of pain. And so it just became, the continuation of life became a lose-lose situation. I wish we lived in a society that didn't allow that to happen, and we don't. I want to say we got to wrap it up. Let's say goodbye to the people who are online, so Keith can go. And then I want to just give anyone else a chance to say something. And if you all want to stay here, Sally and I have to go. But can you stick around for just a few more minutes, Brittany? If you all want to stay here and continue the conversation, thank you very much.